everyone. Welcome to Hops and Highways, another week down. Congratulations. My name is Jessica Lombardo, and I'm editor of Asphalt Contractor Magazine. Joined with me, as always, is Dormy Roberts, associate editor. And we also have a special guest this week. Kieran Bailey is the associate consultant at Hayes Recruiting, and he's going to talk to us today about recruiting in the construction industry and how it's changed because of COVID and what we can kind of expect over the next few months. But first, we always talk about beer. Very important.
So today I'm doing a little bit of rocket surgery. It's a hazy ale by Surly Brewing Company, which is in Minnesota. So it's super juicy with a fruit forward blast of hops. It's delicious. Jess, what are you drinking?
So today I have Yuengling Hershey's. So Yuengling is the oldest brewery in America. I don't know if anybody knew that, but they make my favorite lager ever. And they combined it with Hershey's, which is also out of Pennsylvania, for a porter. And it's delicious. It is dangerously delicious, and I love it. So Kieran, first time with us. What are you drinking today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Today I've gone for a local brewery here close to me in Naperville called Solemn Oath Brewery. Really great team over there. This is their Butterfly Flash Mob, which is a Belgian style IPA. It's one of their I'd say like traditional beers that they're well known for. It's tasty without being too heavy. Always good fun. It was a toss up between that, and they have a nice new hazy one, kind of like Dormy's, called Ultra Soft, but I decided, got to be professional. I'll only drink the light beer today. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and cheers.
So we're going to jump right in on the questions, Kieran. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Hayes, and what your role is there?
Yeah, absolutely. As you guys introduced, I'm Kieran with Hayes, and I work in our Chicago-based office in downtown, specifically on the civil construction side of things. Within our team, we also have a commercial construction arm, fantastic team based here in Chicago. We also have a big presence in the Northeast, in New York, down at our HQ in Tampa, as well as other offices in Houston and plenty other places around the country. And what do Hayes do? So traditionally, we're a staffing and recruiting partner for companies all over the world. But obviously, as it pertains to us here in the construction industry, and specifically here in the Midwest, we work together with both candidates and clients to help them find positions within civil and commercial construction. We also, help them just generally help to improve their professional, whether it's resumes, portfolios, everything. So we're really kind of a 360-degree package as far as helping people take next steps in their careers, and then also obviously helping other companies, outsource, whether it's new projects, and then more specifically, finding the best talent that's out there.
Great. So obviously, due to the pandemic, there have been some big changes in the employment market. And so what are the trends right now for hiring in the construction industry? And can the majority of those workers who lost their jobs during the pandemic expect to be called back maybe once the season starts up again, especially in the North?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, as far as construction as a whole, and probably more specifically civil construction, I think we've kind of battled through the pandemic very well. There hasn't been a huge drop off as far as the large amounts of redundancies and people that found themselves unemployed throughout this year. As a whole, civil construction hasn't done too badly. We published our annual salary guide back earlier on, towards the fall in 2020. And I mean, as far as we found that about 35% of employers, when it was published back in October, were still actually planning on increasing their workforce. And not only were they looking at increasing their, just basic headcount, they were also finding themselves in a position to also increase the base salary of their current employees. So if you're looking at that as a whole, over a third of companies within the whole industry is still saying that, they're growing and they're, being able to offer more money, that it's a pretty good position to be in.
Yeah.
And then obviously, as with the whole country, redundancies had to be made, some of the smaller companies more so, but then equally so some of the larger companies. I spoke to a candidate at BP who said that they're making something like 140,000 worldwide redundancies at an executive level. So it doesn't seem to have really discriminated against one role or one size of company. But as a whole, I think the outlook for people within our industry is very good.
Awesome.
That is great news. Infrastructure funding is a huge issue for the industry, and that leads to uncertainty and therefore hiring freezes for many companies. How are companies overcoming these hiring changes?
Yeah, it's funny that, we're talking about infrastructure funding in a time where we're also kind of looking over another shoulder with, things like COVID relief bills. We just saw last week the latest bill that, again, specifically to our industry, there's going to be a certain, pile of cash being pumped into the departments of transport. And, really fortunately for the Midwest, between Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan, those four states are going to see almost 12 or just over 12% of the whole country's allocation of that relief. So, on one side, that is really good as far as the infrastructure funding that's coming in. And then kind of to the second part of that question, Domi, in terms of hiring freezes, what we're noticing is that most employers, general contractors, however you want to phrase it, albeit that they're not opening up widespread, recruitment drives, most of them will still take on the right candidate at the right time. So my encouragement to people out there that are facing any, feedback that, like you said, is any kind of hiring freeze-esque type terminology is, can you make yourself a little bit more of a versatile candidate in terms of, what kind of experiences do you have? Do you have transferable skills that can allow you to be a good fit across multiple positions, across multiple specialties, perhaps? Because, like I said, from what we're seeing, companies are taking people on if they're the right people for the job.
Awesome. And let's take a cheers to that. So still hiring, still getting the right people in the door when they need them. Cheers. So with a lot of workers, especially in the hospitality industry, kind of displaced and looking for work, do you think that's helped or kind of hurt recruiting in the construction industry? And how is Hays kind of adapting to placing workers who might not have construction experience, but might still be a good fit for the industry?
How have Hays adapted? I kind of touch on that bit first. As with everybody, we've had to kind of take the approach of, recruitment used to be a very, personal, relationship-based industry. And, whether it's face-to-face meetings, having a beer with each other on a Friday afternoon probably wouldn't have been done through a webcam 12 months ago. So, naturally, as everybody has, we have adapted to virtual meetings and, working with people that way. And then, as far as what we're seeing in terms of people coming into the construction industry, like you mentioned with healthcare workers there, it's really about what type of job are you looking to do, and are you a good fit for it? Now that sounds really, really easy to say, but it kind of ties into, I guess, one of the number one pieces of advice we give to anybody is that when you're applying for a job, you need to make your application be relevant to the job that you're applying for. Now, again, slightly easier said than done if you've maybe not had as much experience in a specific field and that you're wondering applying to. But if you've got maybe some very unique experience that does pertain to the job that you're applying for, highlight that. Absolutely. Can you bring that to the forefront of the conversation? When we're working with candidates and clients alike, and they have an idea of who they'd like to hire, and then on the candidate side, they have an idea of who they'd like to work for. We're always asking for an element of flexibility in there, but on the whole, it's, can you make yourself, I mentioned it just a minute ago, you want to be versatile, but are you relevant to what you're applying for? I guess that's the number one key. And that can take itself in many forms, but fundamentally it's, if you've got a business background in the hospitality industry, then potentially a business background style job within the construction industry is within your reach. You wouldn't necessarily be pouring concrete tomorrow if you've not been through that training and education.
So women represent a largely untapped market for hiring in the industry. How can industry work to engage this labor pool?
Yeah, it's an interesting point actually, because about 2 months ago at the end of November, there was a statistical report that came out from the US Bureau of Labor, and it kind of highlighted that pretty much since about 1990, somewhere between 1990 and 1995, the percentage of women in the construction industry in the US has essentially fluctuated in and around 10%. And it's been that way for almost 30 years, which is quite striking, really, that there hasn't been that much fluctuation over that kind of longer period of time. And there are places within the country that, have larger percentages of women. I think if you look at places like Minneapolis, they have a 19% of their workforce in construction are women. Atlanta is 15%. And, we're talking about large places here. Places like Milwaukee is about 8%, Detroit 8%, Chicago's down here at 6%. So as you kind of said, there's a huge opportunity for women to be active within the industry. And in terms of what we see and who we work with, diversity is important regardless of whether you're male, female, regardless of your background or where you're coming from. What we just want to do is find the right candidate for the job. So I absolutely encourage more women to apply in the same way that I would encourage anybody to apply. But yeah, I think it's an exciting time. On a smaller scale, you look at towns like Carmel, just outside of Indianapolis, they're at like 29% of their workforce are women. So we know that it's there, and in fact, actually, Indianapolis as a whole, they're at about 11%. So they're kind of a little bit just above that national average. But, why can't those trends continue into Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, and back up the other side of the lake, out into Michigan? I think more and more younger professionals coming out of university will help with that. And, who knows, we might be having this conversation in 5 years' time and those numbers might be completely different. Here's hoping.
Yeah. So you mentioned, the younger generation kind of coming in, and as the industry is kind of aging out with workers retiring and not being replaced with those workers, that because they just don't find our industry very attractive. So what can we as an industry kind of do to make ourselves more appealing to the younger generation? And what should workers do if they're kind of in search of opportunities?
Yeah, it's a funny one because, the notion that construction is maybe not glamorous, I think is fair as far as, it's not, you learn your trade. Most people learn their trade, either out on the tools or, on a smaller scale first before growing into bigger roles. But in terms of the potential for people within the industry, I think it's actually a very attractive prospect. And what, we've seen as a group here in Chicago and, my colleagues around the country, maybe it's a little bit different for us because we're in a large city like Chicago and New York and Tampa. We actually see a lot of people who come straight out of college and want to, join the industry. Now, maybe in a little bit smaller towns, some more rural areas, that might not be the case. and that could just be indicative of the area. But as far as, what can people do to maybe, get excited about the industry, it's look around you. I think one of the best things about civil construction is it's everywhere, and it will always be everywhere. We're always going to need roads. We're always going to need bridges. We're always going to need utility work being done. And I think the biggest thing for me is, having been involved in the industry now, is everywhere you look, there's construction of some description. And I think over time, I feel very good about the younger people, the younger generation that are coming through. And I think it kind of links into a little bit of forward planning on behalf of construction companies and how they manage their training and things like that. Yeah. And the longevity that young people have within the industry. I think that could maybe be improved, actually. And that would maybe help younger professionals stay in the industry for longer. But, overall, I think it is a fantastic opportunity for people to come in and make a real difference, whether it's physically in terms of buildings and infrastructure, or whether it's learning a phenomenal trade. There's so much within construction that we learn at school that you just don't think about, and then when it comes to it, it's like, oh, I remember that trigonometry class from the 8th grade that I should have probably paid more attention to. So it's everywhere.
Awesome.
And outside of just filling open positions, how is Hayes working to help companies solve their labor issues?
Yeah, I think kind of a little bit, as I just alluded to there, Hayes has been around for over 50 years now, in about 53 years. And as a recruitment and staffing partner, yeah, I guess fundamentally we help people find jobs and we help people find candidates. But a colleague of mine, Greg, over in New York, actually just had an article published in Dredgewire, and he spoke a lot about things called succession planning. And us as a group, we help our clients do this, and I'll kind of come back to the candidates in a minute. But if you think about planning for the future and planning for success, almost, what we're really seeing is a lack of companies that are doing that until it's almost too late. So I think back to that salary guide that we mentioned earlier, 85% of companies are admitting to a skill set shortage within their own companies. Yeah. So, okay, 85% of them have a skill set shortage. Does that mean they now need to completely, reconfigure their recruitment drive? And I don't think that's necessarily the case. What we need to now see is that there's a huge onus on training and development, and that could be better. Succession planning, if you know that you've got, a career senior estimator, PM, project exec, doesn't matter what it is, and 3 or 4 years down the line that they're going to be, hanging up their boots, that's where it's really an astute time to bring a team in, individuals in, doesn't really matter, but start to plan for the future, rather than get to the point where we're now talking about, oh, well, these guys have now just left and we're left with a huge gap to fill, and we don't have anybody to train that we've trained up to do that job. We've either now got to outsource that from somewhere else, use a recruitment company, or using somebody like Hayes. What we can do is we can plan for the future with you, so that you're not now left with this huge void and you feel like you've got to waste time, effort, and energy to just kind of fill that, really, really quickly. A lot of construction in general is kind of fit to purpose for a specific project or a group of projects. And what a lot of companies do is they will kind of bid on projects based on the workforce that they currently have. And what we are helping a lot of companies do now, and a lot of GCs do now, is, okay, well, you're limiting yourself to what you can get yourself involved in if you're only going to include your current workforce. If you have, if you have the option to go out and bid here, bid there, what do you need to be able to make that a success? What do you need to be able to make that happen? Can you maybe spend a little bit more money now in the short term, bring somebody in and train them so that in 5 years' time, you're completely at the top of the pile and everywhere you want to be, rather than kind of looking back and saying, wow, I wish we'd have planned that 5 years ago.
That's awesome. And I'm sure that your partners, they really appreciate that foresight, because a lot of construction companies just don't have that in their wheelhouse. So we have one last question for you. It's our favorite question. We ask it to all of our guests, and we want to know what's the one thing you cannot wait to get back to doing once this pandemic finally ends.
Oh, great question. I think just seeing friends and family, I think is a big one. I don't really mean to be, a cop out and take the easy road, but that really is the key, isn't it? It's not been the same over the last year, and we had an addition to our family the end of last year, so just being able to take them out and kind of experience all the things that I can't wait to show them, all of the civil infrastructure that we help recruit for. And I'm all joking, but I think that, and playing more golf, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, let us cheer to that, the end of the pandemic and getting back to normal. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
That was an awesome conversation, and really thank you, Kieran, for joining us. It's some great insight on the market and the construction industry and what we can kind of expect moving forward. So you can learn more about Hays at haysplc.com. And really thank you for joining us and for helping to fill all those open jobs. So cheers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cheers to that. And if anybody wants to get a hold of that salary guide, then I'm sure you guys can find a way to get my email address out there. Everybody's welcome to it, and we'll help as many people as we can.
We will post your contact information if you're all right with that.
Perfect. That sounds great.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Okay. So on to the news, and it actually was a really big week for infrastructure and the promise of funding, and we're going to just dive right in. So breaking last night, President-elect Biden, he laid out a 2-step rescue and recovery plan, and it's going to spur economic recovery from the pandemic. He proposed a $1.9 trillion rescue package to combat the economic downturn and the COVID-19 crisis. And while the first step of his plan does not include an infrastructure funding, his next step does.
And Biden said that during his first appearance in Congress, he would lay out his Build Back Better plan that would generate even more economic recovery. Biden said the Build Back Better plan will make historic investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, innovation, research and development, and clean energy. Investments in a caregiving economy with skills and training needed by our workers to be able to compete and win in a global economy.
Yeah, so his plan calls for $2 trillion in spending over 4 years, and that's more than $1.7 trillion the campaign previously proposed to spend over a decade. And we're going to drink to infrastructure funding being national news. You talked about it last night for the whole world to see. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers. So this week, the American Society of Civil Engineers released a new report, Failure to Act, Economic Impacts of Status Quo Investment Across Infrastructure Systems, that examines the implications of low infrastructure grades for America's economic future. That is a tongue twister. The report focuses on the incremental and gradual decline of infrastructure systems under current investment scenarios, and shows that the impact to our nation's economy are exaggerated over time and need investments after deferral.
So the report found that the U.S. is falling short of infrastructure funding by trillions of dollars. And if we do not invest in our infrastructure soon, we will be at a $5.6 trillion short of needed funding by 2039. And that will suppress business activity by $23 trillion. If infrastructure funding continues at its current pace, American residents and businesses will really continue to suffer. And the expected impact for every household in the U.S. will be an average loss of more than $3,300 per year in disposable income by 2039. Think of how all of that money would add up. That's a college fund. That's insane.
I can't even imagine that. But the good news is that much of the economic decline from worsening infrastructure, particularly those forecasted from 2030 to 2039, can be prevented with thoughtful investment programs that address documented deficiencies. While President-elect Biden and Congress both agree something needs to be done to address our failing infrastructure, they can't agree on how to get it done.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's talk of impeaching President Donald Trump, and that might also delay any action on infrastructure funding, as Congress is going to be focused on that instead of maybe Biden's 100-day plan. So they're trying to find out a way to get that done or, move infrastructure funding forward. But we really need to find a way to bring our divided Congress together. And they think that infrastructure funding is really a way to do that. So we're going to drink to a productive first 100 days in office for Biden. And we're really hopeful that a framework for funding our roads comes into play. So cheers.
Cheers. The annual State of the American Business speech presented this week, U.S. Chamber of Commerce CEO Thomas Donahue outlined a path for a widespread economic recovery through a bold agenda of infrastructure investments, workforce reskilling, immigration reforms, and reinvigorating America's competitiveness.
So Donahue, he urged policymakers to focus on broad-based economic recovery to regain the 10 million jobs that have been lost over the last year. But he warned that excessive regulations and anti-competitive taxes would undermine this recovery. He's pointed to infrastructure investments as one of the primary initiatives that would lead to recovery, something we've talked about this whole show.
Exactly. The Chamber and the Bipartisan Policy Center, along with more than 140 national and local organizations, announced the launch of Build by 4th of July campaign, urging newly elected and re-elected members of Congress to enact a fiscal and environmentally responsible infrastructure package by the 4th of July of 2021.
As part of the campaign, the coalition is calling for enactment of comprehensive legislation before the 4th of July, 2021. And that legislation, they want it to repair and update the country's crumbling infrastructure, stimulate the economy and create middle class, sustaining jobs, address climate change, promote fiscally and environmentally responsible policies, improve federal project approvals, and address the digital divide.
That sounds like a lot of things.
A lot to do in less than 6 months.
So the intent is to instill not only a sense of urgency, but position infrastructure investment as a top national priority. And we will drink to infrastructure investment again being at the forefront of news this week. Let's hope something comes of it.
Cheers. So earlier in the show with Karen, we talked about recruiting employees to the construction industry, and now we're going to give you a few tips on employee retention. So once you have those employees in your wheelhouse and they're your superstars and they're good workers, and you want to make sure you do everything you can to keep them happy. So today we really just have 4 tips to share with you on retaining your best workers.
And employees leave organizations for many reasons, but the single best way to reduce turnover is to hire the right people to begin with and keep them there. Look at your current employees and focus on your superstars, your most reliable and most consistent people, and work hard to make them happy.
So it's important to also make sure that once you hire someone, you get them adequately trained and mentored. You don't just hire them and shove them out to the job site. You want to make sure that they get the proper training because they're more likely to stay engaged and committed to the organization if they make investments in their career development. And training, yeah, it costs money, but if you think of retention as re-recruiting for your workforce, it's really worth the money.
Next, you want to keep a positive culture. Employees will go the extra mile if they feel responsible for results of their work, have a sense of worth in their job, believing that their jobs make good use of their skills and receive recognition for their contributions. A positive culture means employees feel the way every day, and your company should establish a series of values as a basis for culture, such as honesty, excellence, attitude, respect, and teamwork. A company that creates the right culture will have an advantage when it comes to attracting and keeping those workers.
And this is the most important tip. Is everybody listening? It's a no-brainer. Offer competitive pay and benefits. Sounds easy, but offering a competitive wage can keep your people feeling like their work and their time is valued. Bonus programs, pension, health plans, and paid time off will send a powerful message to your employees about the importance to their organization.
And if you're happy with the employees that you have now, it may be beneficial to implement employee referral bonuses. Not only will employees appreciate the monetary incentive, you will also increase your chances of employee retention, as referred new hires are likely to share the same characteristics, background, experience as your superstars do.
Finally, your company should really stay on top of industry trends. Employees, especially those in the younger generation who are coming into the workforce, they want to feel like they work for a company that is really trying hard to be an industry leader. And this means investing in equipment and technology that's going to help them do their jobs comfortably and efficiently.
And turnover in the construction industry doesn't just mean losing a body to do a job. It means losing a skilled worker. Make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep your best employees happy and on your crew. And we will drink to that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Time for Build America Friday.
Hey.
This week, we go to the state of Florida and the crew at Duval Asphalt, who paved the Fernandina Airport in Fernandina Beach, Florida.
And as you all know, airport projects are intense, and this was no different. So the project was 4,800 feet long. They milled up the pavement and put back down a 2-inch lift. The paving foreman was Chris Austell, and it took the crew 6 days and 6,470 tons with no deficiencies.
Yeah, so awesome work. And thanks to Tracy with Asphalt Testing Solutions for sending the photo into us, which we're going to post after the show. So cheers to Duval Asphalt.
Cheers.
And look at that. My beer's almost gone, and that must mean the show is over. Does that make you sad? I'm sorry, but we'll be back next week. Same time, same Asphalt Contractor Facebook. We will see you all then. And thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe out there. Cheers.
Guys, cheers.
Watch Hops and Highways live every Friday at 3 p.m. on Asphalt Contractor's Facebook page, or catch the replay on forconstructionpros.com/videos.